So we are going to continue here talking about the Psalms. This is Psalms 19. The law of the Lord is perfect. To the choir master, a psalm of David. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber, and, like a strong man, runs its course with joy. Its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise and simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing in heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The rules of the Lord are true, and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold, sweeter also than honey, and drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned. In keeping them there is great reward. Who can discern his errors? Declare me innocent from hidden faults. Keep back your servant also from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me. Then I shall be blameless and innocent of great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. So what can we make of this? Day to day pours out speech. And so if we pick apart this line, day to day, we can see that there is in a linear sense, there's a progression of time from one day to another. There is also mention of a pattern here, whereas a day to progress to a new day is the completion of one cycle and the beginning of another of the same pattern. And so this cyclical nature from day to the next pours out speech. That is, meaning is professed unto the world day after day, and night to night reveals knowledge. Again, the second half of this cycle. The first half, we see the speech, the meaning that's spoken into our existence. The second half of this cycle is the night, in which there is this understanding that takes place, the intelligibility of knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. And so, I'm not entirely sure what he is referring to here. Now, it's entirely possible that he just means that the Creator can hear all forms of speech. and that all forms of meaning and anything that is expressed to be intelligible by a higher intelligence will not go unheard. He says, in them he has set a tent for the sun. And so this next piece here, in them he has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber, and like a strong man runs his course with joy. And so what can we make of this? He says, in them, perhaps referring to the speech that does not go unheard, the words that do not go unheard. In these, he has set a tent for the sun. In other words, an institutionalization of this shining object and this brightness that expands the mind, which of course in the human context is the thing that provides meaning, that provides intelligibility, that categorizes, that gives understanding to the external environment, to the objective world. And so this tent that houses this light of the mind, this conscious mind, this is for the words so that they are not unheard, and which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber. And so a bridegroom that leaves his chamber is full of love and wonder, joy. He comes out for an expressed purpose. He is to be married. He is to be brought into a union with another. And so this institutionalization of meaning, this, in a sense, socialization, is for man, so that his meaning and that his words are not forgotten, that they may be housed and they may have a purpose. So they are brought together in this tent, which we may leave like one who is about to enter in a greater unity and a part of a greater whole. Now that might be completely wrong, but I do think there is some reason in it. Now I also understand that when he says, in them he has set a tent for the sun, he can also be referring to the law of the divine. And the reasoning here would not be dissimilar. Because if the law of the divine is, if a tent is set to hold the sun for the law of the divine, it is the similar sort of idea of this intelligibility, of this way, of this unity, of this bringing together. Not only the word of man, but also the law of God, which permeates throughout nature. I think both of these are, although one may be higher than another, I think their representation in our reality is fairly similar. Again, that is between the word of man and the law of God. Because, of course, we are from God. We are made in God's image. And so therefore, our word should be in the image of God's word. He continues, its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them. And there is nothing hidden from its heat. And so what might this mean? So assuming that this is talking about the law of God, so the law itself. So this this thing, again, it's a breath. It is a word that has meaning, that has intelligibility for the human mind. It is a binding force that binds individuals together, individuals in the sense that they have this perceptual mechanism to perceive of the divine, this mechanism that includes free will, the possibility of self-deception, but also the possibility of salvation and of righteousness. And so this law, rising from the end of the heavens, meaning this metaphorical space of lofty, conscious production. This lofty conscious production resides in this place that we call the heavens, and it extends from one to the other. That is, it rules over the heavens. And this divine law, this unifying law, it unites our highest perceptions, it unites our strongest reason, it unites our strongest feelings in a particular direction. And this directionality is the very thing that human beings, I think, tend to struggle with. It's the question of ought that can't be answered by the toolkit of science. It can't be explained away through the material causality of things. It cannot be explained through the emergent phenomena, regardless of evolutionary origin or not. This remains a dilemma for the human being. But in our case, in the divine case, the law that extends throughout the heavens, throughout all of our conscious might, this law rules over us. And it is the law of the Lord that is perfect, that revives the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making the wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The rules of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey, and drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned. In keeping them, there is great reward. And so I figure I stop here and discuss for a moment the analogy that we have been using thus far, or the illustration, perhaps I should say, to understand and to unpack the Psalms. My critiques have been that the Psalms remain a bit superficial. And I say that because I think we take a lot for granted. But given a certain view, given a certain perception and approach to the Psalms, I think it's more understandable. That is to say, that we as human beings find ourselves thrown into a darkened room. Now this darkened room, just as the law rules over heaven, within it lies objects that exist prior to our inception. And as we find ourselves in this darkened room, as we stumble through it, as we feel our way through it, regardless of our blindness, we begin to put together a picture of what it means for us to be thrown into this place, into this room. That, of course, is a symbol for the larger world. But within this room, and all of its objects that are within it, over time we are able to determine exactly the nature and their function. and they all operate according to fixed laws, laws that unify these objects together. Of course, this is a material example, but I'm using it to represent the sort of more the divine nature, or the heavenly principle. And so it is interesting now, as we are in Psalms 19, that we are beginning to, as often said before, reveal further the surround. And this surround surrounds God. And as we begin to identify all of the things that surround it, we are able to more accurately perceive of what this image of God is, this structure that exists within our experience that we can't quite put our finger on, we can't quite measure it, because it is immeasurable. If it is indeed the creator of all things, it exists outside of our known capabilities of measurement, as it set time itself into motion. And so our perception of such things is that of, as C.S. Lewis might say, that of an author who everywhere leaves his mark on his work that is the novel, but nowhere in the novel do we find the author, just his story and his rules that he has laid down. And in this way we find ourselves in this room. And in this Psalm 19, we begin to understand this very thing. The law that we follow, the law of the conscious mind, the laws of the heavenly principle. We could, ad nauseum, determine the laws of nature, but without the law of the conscious mind, without the law of the perceptual mechanism of the human being, we have nothing to do with all of our might and material prosperity. We have nothing to do except to waste it, and we ourselves waste away with it into the void of nothingness, the despair of ego, and the existential crisis that leads many to suicide, many of an individual and many of a nation. Who can discern his errors? Declare me innocent from hidden faults. Keep back your servant also from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me. Then I shall be blameless and innocent of great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. And so I'm glad of this psalm. I'm glad of true wisdom that comes from this. Again, I am looking more. I'm feeling more in this room, and I could see more in my mind's eye. And yet we have so much yet still to uncover. The Psalms thus far seem to be just scratching the surface. For the Western man, for the man who has been raised in the church and has fallen away from it, there is much that I take for granted. And returning to it now with an adult mind, a mature mind, the real work can be done. So to continue here, chapter 20, Psalm 20. Trust in the name of the Lord our God. To the choir master, a psalm of David. May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble. May the name of God of Jacob protect you. May he send help from the sanctuary and give you support from Zion. May he remember all your offerings and regard with favor your burnt sacrifices. May he grant your heart's desire and fulfill all your plans. We may shout for joy over your salvation, and in the name of our God set up our banners. May the God fulfill all your petitions. Now I know that the Lord saves his anointed. He will answer him from his holy heaven with the saving might of his right hand. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust the name of the Lord our God. They collapse and fall, but we rise and stand up. O Lord, save the King. He may answer us when we call. So, this probably doesn't need to be said, but in verse 5, when it says, and in the name of our God set up our banners, I almost said bananas instead of banners. But like I said, that didn't need to be added in here, but whatever. Okay, so what can we make of this? Psalm 20, trust in the name of the Lord. So we're going to have to return to our illustration here. The illustration of the surround. The illustration of the darkened room that we stumble through. The existence that we are thrown into. And so, what can we stumble over now? What object can we choose to work on understanding? May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble. And so what might trouble be to a man? Any number of things. It could be a loss of faith. It could be a lack of purpose. It could be a lack of meaning. It could be a loss of a love due to illness, due to violence. There's no shortage of trouble in the human experience. And so David says, may the Lord answer you. And what would it mean for us to be answered? That is the question. May the name of God, of Jacob, protect you. May the name of the God of Jacob protect you. A very interesting way to put that. The name of God. Within the name, if we are to name something, let's say we name a human being. Let's say I recall a name of a human being in my mind that is close to me. A close friend. The name is Carl, let's say, a good friend of mine. Now within this name, in my mind, I picture a person. I picture his face. But I also picture something a bit different. It's not an explicit illustration, but rather a myriad of feelings that point me to our friendship and the bond that we hold. And this bond is held together not by explicit illustration, though it can be if it is explored. It is held temporarily in the space of where reason may take up too much hard drive space, let's say. My feelings are the placeholder. This, in some sense, low resolution unification. But strong feelings may produce strong reasons. And so, the name of God, in this way, can be a strong feeling, but it also is a strong, within it, there are many reasons for which we name, for which we call upon this God with a particular name, because of its reasons for giving it that name. And so in the instance of the a friend of mine, we have had no shortage of intimate conversations about how our lives are going, about the decisions that we have made when we were younger, what we could have changed, the things that we've been through together, the experiences that we had. Of course, not all of our relationship or the force that binds us together is wound up in intimate conversation. It is more than that. It is shared experiences. And as I recall all of these things from my stored memory into the explicit, into the objective reality, as I say it into this microphone for likely nobody to hear except for myself, I begin to uncover its nature for the subject to understand. And so when I think about the name of God, it passes over me, certainly would have passed over me as a child, as a matter of little significance. But now as I sit here and I reflect on it, it is of massive importance. It is a structure. It is a placeholder in the mind of man for something much greater, something that improves his condition, that makes him understand his relationship to another person. And this is fundamental in understanding his relationship to the divine. As without my understanding of my friend, of course I don't necessarily need his name to understand my friend. But the name is not nothing. It means something. And then David says, may he send help from the sanctuary and give you support from Zion. May he remember all your offerings and regard with favor your burnt sacrifices. So in a sense, David is saying, may the Lord recognize your attention. And certainly the more we attend to something, the more we embody and incorporate that something and manifest it into the world. Now I know I'm rereading this and I've read it through once, but it is for my own understanding and thought process. He may grant you your heart's desire and fulfill your plans. May we shout for joy over your salvation, and in the name of our God set up your banners. May the Lord fulfill all your petitions. Now there is something here that I can feel, something that is pulling me towards it that I can't quite articulate. A bit of wisdom that is just beneath the surface of my reason. Now I can't indulge this as being real unless I can draw it forth. But there is something there that I hope future psalms will be able to pull from me. So David says, now I know that the Lord saves his anointed. He will answer him from his holy heaven with the saving might of his right hand. Again, the right hand is this symbol of authority, of security, comfort to a certain degree, stability, certainly. Some trust in chariots. In other words, some trust in the violence or the here and now. This reminds me of Friedrich Nietzsche a bit. Some trust in chariots and some in horses. But we trust in the name of the Lord, our God. They collapse and fall, but we rise and we stand upright. It is because the very view of reality is different than those who trust in the earthly things, or in the here and now. Time to them is something different than this linear conception. O Lord, save the King. May he answer us when we call. And so good. So I'm glad now the Psalms are, as I've gotten into them now, I'm 20 Psalms in here, and they are slowly uncovering the surround. And as we uncover the surround, we determine the nature of what is the object of the surround. And of course the object of the surround is God. So moving now to Psalm 21, the King rejoices in the Lord's strength. To the choir master, a psalm of David. O Lord, in your strength the King rejoices, and in your salvation how greatly he exalts. You have given him his heart's desire, and have not withheld the request of his lips. For you meet him with rich blessings. You set a crown of fine gold upon his head. He asked life of you. You gave it to him. Length of days forever and ever. His glory is great through your salvation. Splendor and majesty you bestow on him, for you make him most blessed forever. You make him glad with the joy of your presence. For the King trusts in the Lord, and through the steadfast love of the Most High, he shall not be moved. Your hand will find out all your enemies. Your right hand will find out those who hate you. You will make them as a blazing oven when you appear. The Lord will swallow them up in his wrath, and fire will consume them. You will destroy the descendants of the earth from the earth, and their offspring from among the children of man. Though they plan evil against you, though they deceive mischief, they will not succeed. For you will put them to flight. You will aim at their faces with your bows. Be exalted, O Lord, in your strength. We will sing and praise your power. So, first thoughts. The King. Now this is a position and an institution which the Lord reluctantly accepted of Israel, given their free will. And now, of course, this psalm is from a king. Now, of course, David was an accepted individual by God. He followed in the ways of the Lord. But still, I think we have to remember that the institution itself was not, at least according to the biblical scripture, was not the form of government that man was to be united under. Okay. And we just finished our thoughts on the American Revolution, and I think there's a lot there to be said about the monarchy, about the institution of hereditary succession, about man's relationship and his role to that institution. Very good thoughts there from our American founders. And I would have to agree with the God of the Old Testament and also our founders of this nation that the institution of the monarchy, for the kingship in general, is not the system of governance that man should submit to, regardless of whether or not the king follows in the ways of the Lord. That being said, so now he's saying this king, this holder of this position, the head of this institution, thankfully, in the people's case, rejoices in the Lord's strength. Okay? And so he says, O Lord, in your strength the king rejoices, and in your salvation how greatly he exalts. So salvation is something of a deliverance. It is the bringing towards It's a moving away from. And so what we're moving away from is our fallen nature and moving towards the divine nature in the case of the salvation. Now, of course, in the psalm, we don't really have anything that describes this divine nature or of the sinful nature in this particular psalm. But we do have this understanding that it is within this process of moving from point A to point B that there is preference, that there is a right between these two locations, between the individual that is not saved and those who accept reality and move towards the divine. You have given him his heart's desire and have not withheld the request of his lips. Now this means, I think this can be misinterpreted, because I was misinterpreting it as I read it the first time. That's why I say that. But I think this means, now that I've read it the second time, you have given him his heart's desire and have not withheld the request of his lips. It's within this very request and the speech from the mouth that is not withheld. His heart's desire is not withheld from the divine, because the heart's desire is in line with the divine. And so therefore, that if something is in line with something, it's connected with, and in that connectedness, there is the proper infrastructure for the divine grace to flow into the human being. Or in this case, King David. For you meet him with rich blessings. You set a crown of fine gold upon his head. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Nice language. He asked life of you. You gave it to him. Length of days forever and ever. Okay. His glory is great through your salvation. Splendor and majesty you bestow on him. Okay, similar idea here. Nothing new. For you make him most blessed forever. You make him glad with the joy of your presence. Okay, so there's something a little bit different here. A little piece of this surround that we are now uncovering. For you make him most blessed forever. You make him glad with the joy of your presence. And so now we understand that the presence of the divine brings man joy. Now this is contrasted with the fear of God, and this fear of God is more of a fear of the truth that is brought. But as we move away from the path of our sinful nature and move towards the divine through salvation, through acceptance, then joy in time, once we get past the painful period of facing up to the facts, joy will flow in. For the king trusts in the Lord, and through the steadfast love of the Most High he shall not be moved. Your hand will find out all your enemies, your right hand will find out those who hate you. So again, the right hand is the hand of authority, it is the hand of stability, it is the hand of security and protection. And so the right hand finds those who hate, because those who hate are bound to disrupt the stability of the system. And so it is within the right hand's very nature to protect against this destructive force, to protect against the enemies, whether this brings physical violence, psychological disturbance, behavioral modification, or any number of ways that the enemy can corrupt a stable way of being and a stable process of thought a stable structure of governance, a stable structure of community, of family. Again, this is a scale at all levels here of reality, the Russian doll scenario. You will make them a blazing oven when you appear. The Lord will swallow them up in his wrath, and fire will consume them. You will destroy their descendants from the earth, and their offspring from among the children of man. Though they plan evil against you, though they devise mischief, they will not succeed. For you will put them to flight. You will aim at their faces with your bows. Be exalted, O Lord, in your strength. We will sing your praise and praise your power. So not too much new there. Again, the language can be a bit off-putting, but once you unpack the meaning, it's really not. Although the color may not be agreeable to our tastes, what remains is that is the image that it is representing. So try not to let the color distract from the meaning or the illustration. Okay. Okay, so that concludes Psalm 21. And now Psalm 22 is quite the long one. So let's jump into this here. So I feel like this is going to be a bit of an interesting one. The title is, Why Have You Forsaken Me? This is Psalm 22. To the choir master, according to the doe of the dawn, a psalm of David. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but I find no rest. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you our fathers entrusted. They trusted, and you delivered them. To you they cried, and were rescued. In you they trusted, and were not put to shame. But I am a worm, and not a man, scorned by mankind and despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They make mouths at me, they wag their heads. Quote, he trusts in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, for he delights in him. End quote. Yet you are he who took me from the womb. You made me trust you at my mother's breasts. On you was I cast from my birth, and from my mother's womb you have been my God. Be not far from me, for my trouble is near, and there is none to help. Many bulls encompass me. Strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths at me, like a ravening and roaring lion. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breast. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death. For dogs encompass me. A company of evildoers encircles me. They have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments amongst them, and for my clothing they cast lots. But you, O Lord, do not be far off. O you my help, come quickly to my aid. Deliver my soul from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dog. Save me from the mouth of the lion. You have rescued me from the horns of the wild oxen. I will tell of your name to my brothers. In the midst of the congregation I will praise you. You who fear the Lord, praise him. All you offspring of Jacob, glorify him. And stand in awe of him, all of you offspring of Israel. For he has not despised or abhorred the affliction or the afflicted, and he has not hidden his face from him, but has heard when he cried to him. From you comes my praise in the great congregation. My vows I will perform before those who fear him. The afflicted shall eat and be satisfied. Those who seek him shall praise the Lord. May your hearts live forever. All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord. And all the families of the nations shall worship before you, for kingship belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. All the prosperous of the earth eat and worship. Before him shall bow all who go down to the dust. Even the one who could not keep himself alive, posterity shall serve him. It shall be told of the Lord to the coming generation. They shall come and proclaim his righteousness to a people yet unborn, that he has done. Okay, so let's dissect this here. Why have you forsaken me? This is Psalm 22. Reading it in one after the other, these psalms, it seems kind of schizophrenic. On one hand, in 21 we have the king rejoices in the Lord's strength. 22, why have you forsaken me? 20, trust in the name of our God. Not that it means much, it's just an observation. Of course, these were written at different times. So David says, why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groaning? O my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night I find no rest. And so here we see a struggling. I think this is a struggling of faith. Now it's possible it's a struggling of faith, because exactly what does he believe that he is missing? What answer does he feel robbed of? That's an important question, and the answer to which must be known before we can say with any degree of certainty that David is struggling with a lack of faith here. And he says, yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you our fathers trusted, they trusted, and you delivered them. To you they cried and were rescued, in you they trusted and were not put to shame. And this is sort of a Job-like scenario, it seems. He's saying, well, why is me? Woe is me. This has happened to me. So therefore, things are rotten. You've helped people before me. So I must be a worm and not a man, scorned by mankind and despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They make mouths at me. They wag their heads. He continues and he says, you are he who took me from the womb. You made me trust you at my mother's breasts. On you was I cast from my birth. And from my mother's womb you have been my God. Be not far from me, for trouble is near, and there is none to help. And so particularly interesting here is this next verse. He said, "Many bulls encompass me. Strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths at me like a ravening and roaring lion." It's interesting here, not for the depth of its meaning, but rather for the symbolism and the use of the animals, because this is useful, I think, in any case when somebody mentions the bulls or a lion. He says, "Many bulls encompass me. Strong bulls." So this animalistic figure that wishes to do him harm, to disrupt the harmony, and moreover from that, it is an animalistic analogy, partly because bulls are of a lower nature than human beings. Bulls are animals. They are, in a sense, of the earth. They do not have the capacity for conceiving of the divine nature and utilizing that word, that divine word, in the way that humans can to raise their material circumstances. And so we see here David in a position of uncertainty. His enemies surround him. He is faltering. I think this is true. Now we can say that he is faltering in his faith, because he is unsure of if what he believes in will actually save him, given the circumstances that surround him. Given his current condition, he is poured out like water. All of his bones are out of joint. His heart is like wax. It is melted within his breast. His strength is dried up like a potsherd or a broken ceramic bowl. And my tongue sticks to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death. That's a strong thing to say to the Creator, to God. And so we see here this, this asking why, and there is certainly anger in this appeal to the divine. He says, "For dogs encompass me, a company of evildoers encircles me." Again, the same cycle that we're falling back into, of the enemies that are around him, the people that stand over him. Then he says, "But you, O Lord, do not be far off." And it's interesting that it is in a form of an exclamation, as if he is telling, rather than asking what he can do to receive. "O you, my help, come quickly to my aid, deliver my soul from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dog. Save me from the mouth of the lion. You have rescued me from the horns of the wild oxen." See, you've done this before. Now I face a new foe in the form of a lion. Can you not do the same now? And he says next, "I will tell of your name to my brothers. In the midst of a congregation I will praise you." So the bit of a bargaining here. An interesting way to go about attempting to accept divine intervention. Certainly praise is a good thing, but what he's attempting to exchange it for, I think it is not. "For you comes my praise in the great congregation. My vows I will perform before those who fear him. The afflicted shall eat and be satisfied. Those who seek him shall praise the Lord. May your hearts live forever. All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations shall worship before you, for kingship belongs to the Lord, and he rules over nations. It's an interesting statement there. So now he's cycling back around. He's saying, okay, I just had my little temper tantrum. And it's like, okay, we have to remain faithful. All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord. When he says, for the kingship belongs to the Lord, and he rules over nations, I find this to be particularly interesting. Again, especially since the institution of the kingship is not the under the instruction of the divine, under the instruction of God. All the prosperous of the earth eat and worship. Before him shall bow all who go down to the dust. Even the one who cannot keep himself alive. It's another interesting statement here. So before him shall bow all who go down to the dust. Now earlier in this psalm we saw reference to the dust and saw it associated to death. He says, my strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death. And so when we read this, before him shall bow all who go down to the dust, it's possible that he is talking about someone who is potentially sacrificing themselves for a greater good, but perhaps a soldier. All of these people that are fighting for a greater good, they shall bow down, those who go to the dust, perhaps to death. And then he says, even the one who cannot keep himself alive. Again, I think of a soldier. Posterity shall serve him. It shall be told of the Lord to the coming generation. They shall come and proclaim his righteousness to a people yet unborn, that he has done it. And so here we see the concern for the future generations, the continuation of the spirit or the soul of a body of people rather than one individual, this coming together, this unifying spirit. Let's move on to Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, a psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So a famous psalm, no doubt. And so he says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And of course this implies that that God, the divine spirit, is the guiding force, and he provides, or God provides. He makes me lie down in green pastures, meaning as a shepherd he leads the animals, or the flock of human beings, to green pastures. Green pastures is a symbol for abundance, for food, security. He leads me beside still waters. And of course water is a symbol for change, temporariness, time, perhaps, uncertainty of time, the cyclical nature of reality. And to be led beside still waters is implied that this cyclical nature is the potential destabilizing effects that water and the various cycles and patterns of our existence can bring is dulled by the presence of the Lord. It is made bearable by following the laws and the rules of the Lord. And thus he leads me besides the still waters. He restores my soul. And what would this mean? Restore from what? From what condition? Of course, we would assume that the soul is restored to a more upright position, or of a brighter condition, from a less upright or a more darkened condition. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And his name is God, and he is what he is. He is the absolute, he is truth. Full stop. And so he knows the paths of righteousness. Although the paths of righteousness are not here laid out. And then, of course, the famous passage here, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So this rod and staff, again, this symbol of the shepherd, this tool that is used to herd, that is used to direct, and this tool that is used to herd and to direct, it is used by a good shepherd to lead in a proper direction. And what is that direction? That direction is implied earlier. He lies me down in green pastures. And so again, the green pastures is a symbol for safety, security, abundance. And so this is where we are led by God to green pastures. And so again, returning to the analogy of this around in this darkened room, trying to piece together where the divine is, what the divine is. Here's another piece. Anything that brings us towards this abundance and this stability of the whole to consume and to be prosperous as they lie down in green pastures, and to have a true leader, and under this leadership are unified in a collective and a body. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. So, this preparing of a table is another symbol of food, of sustenance, of, in a sense, security. To have food. And he does this in the presence of his enemies. And his enemies will see this. They will see his abundance. And perhaps they will be jealous. Perhaps they will ask, why does he have this? Perhaps they will want to take it for themselves. Perhaps they will want to know how they can be more like David. Surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Psalm 24, the King of Glory, a Psalm of David. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein, for he has founded it upon the seas, and established it upon the rivers. Who shall ascend the hill to the Lord, and who shall stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and pure heart, who does not lift up his soul to what is false, and does not swear deceitfully. He will receive blessings from the Lord, and righteousness from the God of his salvation. Such is the generation of those who seek him, who seek the face of God, of Jacob. Lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, strong and mighty, the Lord, mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O gates, and lift them up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. And so what in our darkened room have we bumped into whilst reading this psalm? The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. So this is of divine creation, and the fullness and everything in it belongs to that source. The world and those who dwell therein, for he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers. That is, he created stability out of inherent instability, provided order to chaos, or perhaps order to disunity. And so, in such a case, when we have a divine being that orders the universe from its disordered component parts, who then, what man, shall stand up tall? For if a man is to stand upright, it is because he knows the way to go. He's confident. He has faith in it. He has good reason for it. Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? And who shall stand by his holy place? And then here we are beginning to, again, receive some of this wisdom. He who has clean hands and a pure heart. And so what does it mean to have clean hands? Of course, this is an analogy, this is a metaphor. For if we have unclean hands, they are full of dirt. They're not fit for eating, for the finer things, for intimate human interaction, the shaking of hands, the embrace of another. And so, by this characterization of unclean hands, they are sort of a symbol of inherent disunity, because they prevent the bonds that clean hands would otherwise permit. And a pure heart. And of course this is a more difficult one. The heart is a frustrating thing, in my opinion, because it's as much associated with feeling as it is to a reasoning for a certain cause. That is the cause of love. You reason through that lens, rather than pure reason, which is indifferent to the ends. It reasons for reason's sake. And so this pureness of heart, I think, is this combination of the feeling with the utilization of human reason. And it is not just the feeling with the reason in tandem. It is the particular direction, the particular path that the emotion and the reason take together. This is what makes it pure. And of course the next line, who does not lift up his soul to what is false. Now what is true and what is false is a difficult matter. How do we decide what is true? We can observe, we can ask questions, we can design experiments. We could use mathematics. We can use our intuition. No doubt intuition is based on, at least in part, empirical observation from past experiences. All of these, perhaps, they go into that which is not false. However, as I've said before, pure reason is not really concerned with what ought to be. And while you, in the case of pure reason, may have found a particular truth, what you do with it is a matter of the soul. And in this, within this realm, this is where the level of the rightness and wrongness that we are considering here lies. It does not lie in the superficial, the pure facts of our objective reality. It lies within the soul of man and the placement of the facts of our objective reality into some sort of order. And as we have discussed before, the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein. For he has founded it upon the seas, and established it upon the rivers. Again, this unity from disunity, a harmony from an otherwise disharmonious universe. And it's the Spirit, again, that unites it. So therefore, just as in our many references to the Russian doll, it must be mimicked at the smaller level, and the interior, whereas the human being would represent the interior. Smaller in nature, but similar in kind. He will receive blessing from the Lord, and righteousness from the God of his salvation. Such is the generation of those who seek him, who seek the face of God of Jacob. And so let's pause here for a moment. And if I were to consider our current predicament, the American predicament in particular, we are 140 years away from Friedrich Nietzsche's contributions to the human race. And since then, we have not had a prophet. We have not had this appeal to a dying Christian nation to get our acts together. And so when I see this, he will receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. Such is the generation of those who seek him, who seek the face of God, of the God of Jacob. And I can't help but to think, well, anybody can bring the light, but it's a matter of where you shine it. And if we bring the light as it is being shown here through Scripture, it would not translate to a modern day. It doesn't mean the light can't be shown, but it has to be shown in a different manner, in an updated manner, in a sense. Perhaps not updated, but in congruence with the way of things, with the way that we see the world now. And so to continue here, lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of your glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O gates, lift them up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. And so exactly what he's referring to here in terms of the lifting of the gates, it's uncertain, but for my interpretation and for my thoughts on the matter, of course the gate, or a gate, is a barrier between an inside and an outside, the intention of which is to prevent one from crossing at a certain threshold. And if that threshold is removed, it is implied that whatever it was blocking in the first place is able to pass through that threshold. And I can't help but to imagine that this threshold can exist in many different circumstances, in many different points of our experience. And upon the individual experience, it is obvious that in an individual's soul, let's say, if the gates are closed, then the divine will not reach that person. And so, if we are to lift up the head, open the conscious mind, and let it be lifted, then the divine light will enter in. Teach me your paths. This is Psalm 25 of David. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O my God, in you I trust. Let me not be put to shame. Let not my enemies exalt over me. Indeed, none who wait for you shall be put to shame. They shall be ashamed who are wantonly treacherous. Make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me. For you are the God of my salvation. For you I will wait all day long. Remember your mercy, O Lord, and steadfast love, for they have been from of old. Remember not the sins of my youth or my transgressions. According to your steadfast love, remember me, for the sake of your goodness, O Lord. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore he instructs sinners in the way. He leads the humble in what is right, and he teaches the humble his way. All the paths of the Lord are steadfast love and faithfulness, for those who keep his covenant and his testimonies. For your name's sake, O Lord, I pardon my guilt, for it is great. Who is the man that fears the Lord? Him will he instruct in the way that he should choose. His soul shall abide in well-being, and his offspring shall inherit the land. The friendship of the Lord is for those who fear him, and he makes known to them his covenant. My eyes are ever towards the Lord, for he will pluck my feet out of the net. Turn to me and to be gracious. Turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted. The troubles of my heart are enlarged. Bring me out of my distresses. Consider my affliction and my trouble, and forgive all my sins. Consider how many are my foes, and with that violent hatred they hate me. O guard my soul and deliver me. Let me not be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. May integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait for you. Redeem Israel, O God, out of all his troubles. So now we have the right question to ask. The path. What is the path? We have seen many times before the suggestion of righteousness, the suggestion of salvation, the path to take. But what exactly is that path? And in this psalm, it is at the asking of that question, or we'll leave it there, yeah, the asking of the question. Can you teach me your paths? And he says that he is ready. And this is the way to accept the divine grace, is by being willing and being ready. And so in this way of being open and ready to receive, it will come. And so David here is going through this process of saying, he's continually battling his enemies, within his homeland or abroad. And he struggles back and forth. I've been faithful to you. Perhaps he follows the laws of Moses. He, in his conscious wanderings, he comes to clearer details about what exactly it means to be an upright individual, to follow the Lord, and that indeed people should follow the Lord, that this is not just about the individual, it's about future generations, it's about being led to green pastures. And so we know the directionality of this thing, but we still don't know the particularities. And so he's saying, I have sinned in my past, and I have much guilt from it. But I know that you are upright. He says, I admit that I'm not perfect. Remember not the sins of my youth or my transgressions. According to your steadfast love, remember me, for the sake of your goodness. And of the Lord he says, he leads the humble in what is right, and teaches the humble his way. All the paths of the Lord are steadfast love and faithfulness for those who keep his covenant and his testimonies. For your name's sake, O Lord, pardon my guilt, for it is great. Who is the man who fears the Lord? Him he will instruct in the way that he should choose. So we mentioned the covenant. We have a little bit of information here, a bit more information, again, to write in this surround that allows us to more clearly identify the divine. He says, all the paths of the Lord are steadfast love and faithfulness. And so steadfast love is this sort of devotion to love, to love is, I think, inherently a unifying force. And as we saw in the Psalm 24, the King of Glory, for he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers, referring to the earth. The divine is an inherently unifying spirit, unifying force. And the path, the way, is steadfast love. Again, this unifying force between individuals, between other conscious agents, bringing them together. Bringing them together in a way that everyone can coexist. And faithfulness. And I think I've discussed this earlier, but I think it's important to continually mention that, from my perspective, faith is not something that you have because of a lack of evidence or a lack of proof. Faith is quite the opposite. It is something that you have because of evidence and because of proof. And it may be based on a particular philosophy. It may be based on certain principles or teachings, but it is the faith of the teaching, it is the faith of the principle in seeing the results of that produces this faithfulness. It does not start with faith per se, unless we consider it in the context of the family. Of course, there is faith on the part of the child for pretty much everything that the parent tells the child, and the parent could be wrong. But from my point of view, from the adult perspective, faith is to be acquired gradually. It is not something that you take on and hit the ground running with. It is quite the opposite. It's something that you come into through experience and through understanding. And so I think we will stop here for today and continue on next time with Psalm 26. I will bless the Lord.